Funding for public education is on the table as lawmakers look at the proposed Promise Act. Supporters say the funding formula currently used is outdated and that more money is needed to close the achievement gap. I sat down with Laura Demakis, the president of the Chicopee Education Association, to hear why she's in favor of the Promise Act.
We had a team that put it together, and the MTA was very supportive of that, but so was the Chicopee School Committee and the Chicopee Superintendent. They were wonderful. We had city council members there, we had school committee members there, we had parents there, we had teachers there, we had hopefully students were there. And so the idea was to educate the community on the funding issue, because a lot of people don't understand when we're sitting in there saying, you know, oh, we need, not just that we need more funding, but there's an opportunity. This is the opportunity over the last 25 years, and probably won't happen again very soon, to get the funding we need so that Chicopee can perform the way it's really possible to perform. So it was an educational event to try and inform people and then motivate people to talking to their legislatures and to contacting the legislatures and say, please, the Promise Act. You can't go with any of the other bills. We need the Promise Act in Chicopee.
So let's talk a little bit about the Promise Act. It really is looking at, you know, obviously additional funding and overhauling the foundation budget, which was set up in 1993 with the Education Reform Bill under Chapter 70. Yeah. But many people say, as you would probably agree, it's outdated and it doesn't serve the needs of our community now. What are some of the costs that have gone up that are not being met to the standard that you think they need to be?
So the Foundation Budget Review Commission found really there are four big criteria, especially in a place like Chicopee and Holyoke and Springfield and other communities like that, Brockton, Fall River. The four big things are the cost of health insurance has far exceeded our raises and our increases in our salaries. I mean, we have an average increase of 2%. And that might not even be the average. It might be more like 1.5. And last year we had a health insurance increase of 14%. So that's one of the big ones. And they actually realize that. And that matters because then it's really hard to get good teachers and keep teachers. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing was the amount of ELL students in a district. Ours has gone up here in Chicopee. Most of the gateway communities, the number of ELL students have gone up. So then your services need to go up. I mean,
English
you have kids
language learners,
English language learners, yes. Okay. And those English language learners need different services because they don't know the language, so they need that support. That has gone up, yet the services for them hasn't gone up and hasn't been provided for the way it should be. Kids with disabilities, all kinds of disabilities, those numbers have increased for a number of reasons. And the resources to help those kids has not increased. We are trying, we are stretched to the limit. We have more paras in the classroom, we have more, special ed people. However, we don't have the services. We don't have the numbers of people that we need to be able to accommodate those kids so that they can reach their learning potential. And the last one is that the lower income families. If you have an increase in lower income families, then you have to help those communities with that. So the gateway communities that are struggling, so in case you didn't know, the way the budget formula works is there are kind of two pieces. One is the Chapter 70, which comes from the state, and then the communities are also supposed to provide. So the problem is that the gateway communities that have the increase in poverty or increase in lower income families, they're not able to provide the same equitable amount of money that they give. Okay, so for example, Chicopee gives on average about 2% above what the state mandates their portion is. Springfield and Holyoke are giving 0%. Places like West Springfield, 20%. There are places other places in the state, particularly in the eastern part of the states, 50, 60% above what the state gives. Those are the communities that are thriving. So there's a definite connection between that. Now these communities, people will say, oh, the communities should, be paying for the education. Okay, except that if you're talking about communities that have increased poverty, okay, they're having to take care of those things first. Also, they're not the communities that can give a 2.5 override. They're not the communities that can afford tax increases. So that's the struggle, and that's the part that we need to educate people on.
And what do you see specifically in the classroom? Because a lot of times when you're talking about budgets and bills and all the things that are going on in Beacon Hill, like people tune out. Specifically, what do you see in the classroom that's impacting your job?
So that was one of my favorite parts of the Fund Our Future Forum, was trying to get people a bird's eye view into the classroom. I've been teaching 18 years, and in those 18 years, I have seen kids, I have definitely seen an increase in our social emotional needs. Our kids are coming in, sometimes we're wanting them to focus on MCAS, they haven't had a meal that day, or they have family issues, or whatever else that comes with increased poverty in a district. How am I going to clothe myself? I have seen increased special ed needs. Okay, not only the number of students, but the types of needs they have. And we're having to accommodate that. And I commend the District of Chicopee. They have used every possible resource they can use, but they are stretched so thin that every kid is just not getting their needs met. We have increased, like I said, students with not only physical disabilities, but other disabilities that prohibit them from reaching their learning potential. The number of ELL students have increased. I mean, we had Puerto Rico, when that whole issue happened in Puerto Rico, a lot of them came up our way, and we were happy to have them in with our students, but those poor kids can't speak English. So imagine trying to, reach a curriculum and reach your maximum potential
and
when
help
you
them
can't,
as well,
you don't have the language
yeah.
ability to do that. And we have excellent ELL providers. We have wonderful teachers and admin and everyone all the way up, paraprofessionals who are working with these kids, but it's just not enough. They don't have the resources, we don't have the technology, we don't have the number of people, and we have big class sizes. And the reality is, the other thing I've seen, class sizes getting bigger as time has gone on. That's ridiculous. Everyone knows the smaller class size is going to reach the kids easier. So now what we've done in the classroom is, over the last few years, is we try and make the class sizes smaller by having groups. So, we'll have a teacher-led group, and then we'll have another group that usually sometimes can have a paraprofessional, and then we'll have another group where the kids are kind of working independently. And that's great, and it can work well. It's not always the way you want to do it 24/7. But the problem is, in one of those groups, you really need technology. We don't have the technology.
Right.
Our technology, I was so thrilled when we got technology in our school. It literally is outdated 3 to 5 years down the line. So you're always having to change that. And then as soon as you get used to something, either it doesn't work, or they've changed it for something else, or we can't afford to have it in the first place.
Some people would say, though, look, I don't have my kids in public school for a variety of reasons. It could be religious, it could be class size. They might have them in, a parochial school. They might be homeschooling. Why should I care, and why should I want my taxes to go up to fund public schools if I don't believe in them? How do you address that?
Two things. As a citizen and person in a community, I would say you don't see communities succeed that don't have successful schools. You will not see a community with a failing school be a thriving community. That doesn't happen. You will also not see a thriving community with a failing school. It just doesn't happen. So that would be my first thing. As someone who lives in a community, I want my I want my real estate to go up, right? My property values. I want businesses to come in. I want a tax base in my community to make things easier. That is not going to happen unless you have a solid education public school system. So that would be my first thing. My second thing is, if these public schools were funded the way they were supposed to be all these years, we wouldn't be having these issues. We wouldn't be having these discussions. People wouldn't want to homeschool their kids. They would see a different public school. Our kids would be performing. I see the kids in Chicopee with all the struggles they have and the amazing ways that they perform on these tests. And I hate that that's the only way we notice they're performing, because they perform in all kinds of other ways, and they're magnificent. But if they had the money and the resources, I remember one time, I'm just going to share this, not too long ago, when our first year testing on MCAS online, and I remember that the kids in our school, in the middle school, we have no air conditioning. So at the time we tested, it was over 90 degrees in the place that they had to test. So we had to shut the lights down. We had to open the windows to try and get some air circulation. A bird comes in. So imagine during MCAS what happens then, right? All the kids are like turning. You can't possibly think that test score is the best of their ability. They're sweating, they're hot,
Right.
They're tired, they're groggy, but that is the score. What is the score is going to reflect. So my point to all that is that if you have a child in a parochial school or in a charter school, I understand it, but the reality is they get to have restrictions. They get to not choose some kids to come in. They get to have smaller class sizes. They get to have consequences. Those are the same things we need in public schools, but we don't get to have because we don't have the funding. The big class sizes is number one. The big class sizes, the staff number, and the resources, especially technological, are huge, huge, huge. We have a number of teachers who have to go out and use, somehow get donations.
Right.